The station was a cathedral of quiet that night, the kind of quiet that seems to soak up sound, leaving only the rhythmic sigh of the rain on the glass roof. The last train had come and gone, yet on a bench under the harsh fluorescent light, an elderly woman sat perfectly still. Her name was Eleanor. She wore a simple, well-kept coat, and her hands, adorned with a single thin wedding band, were folded neatly in her lap. Her gaze wasn't on the departure board or the exit, but fixed on the dark, empty tracks, as if waiting for a train that wasn't on the schedule. Leo was late. He was always late, it seemed. His tie was loose, his laptop bag heavy on his shoulder, and his mind was a frantic scroll of unfinished reports and a bitter argument with his boss that still echoed in his skull. He burst through the station doors, a gust of wet wind following him, only to skid to a halt. The platform was deserted. The last train home was pulling away in the distance, its red taillights dissolving into the rainy dark. "Perfect," he muttered, running a hand through his damp hair. "Just perfect." As he turned, ready to call for a costly ride, he saw her, Eleanor, a solitary figure on the long bench. Concern, a flicker of it amidst his irritation, made him pause. He walked over, his shoes clicking on the wet tiles. "Ma'am," he said, his voice softer than he intended, "the last train just left. Do you need help getting a taxi? The station's about to close." Eleanor turned her head slowly. Her eyes were clear, startling blue, and they held a serenity that felt entirely out of place. She offered a small, patient smile. "Oh, I know," she said, her voice like paper rustling. "Thank you, dear, but I'm not waiting for the train." Leo blinked. "Oh, are you lost? Can I call someone for you?" He pulled out his phone, the bright screen a jarring intrusion in the muted space. She shook her head gently. "No, I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." She paused, then said something that sent a strange chill down Leo's spine, not of fear, but of profound curiosity. "You see, God told me to wait here." Leo wasn't a particularly religious man. He believed in spreadsheets, deadlines, and concrete results. Yet the way she said it, so matter-of-fact, so utterly convinced, left no room for argument. It wasn't the statement of someone confused. It was a quiet declaration of faith. He sank onto the bench beside her, not out of politeness now, but out of a need to understand. "He told you to wait here? At an empty train station? In the rain?" Eleanor nodded, her eyes drifting back to the tracks. "He did. It was a feeling, a pull in my heart, as clear as a voice. After my Samuel passed, I've learned to listen to those quiet nudges. So I put on my coat, and I came." She patted his knee, a grandmotherly gesture that felt strangely comforting. "And now, here you are." Leo let out a short, incredulous laugh. "Here I am, missing my train because I was too busy yelling at my boss about quarterly projections." The bitterness seeped back into his voice. Some divine appointment. He meant it sarcastically, but Eleanor just smiled wider. "Tell me about it," she said simply. "The yelling." And so, under the lonely lights, with the security guard starting his final round in the distance, Leo found himself talking. He talked about the pressure, the feeling of being a cog in a machine, the emptiness of a promotion he thought he wanted. He spoke of his loneliness in the city, how his friendships had faded into text messages and likes. Words poured out of him that he hadn't even admitted to himself. Eleanor listened, not with pity, but with a deep, absorbing attention, occasionally nodding or making a soft sound of understanding. "You're carrying stones in your pockets, dear. Stones with names like anger and fear and not enough. No wonder you're tired." She reached into her own neat handbag and pulled out 2 slightly squashed peanut butter cookies wrapped in a napkin. She offered one to Leo. "My Samuel's favorite. I always carry a few."
It was such a small, kind, utterly human gesture. Leo took the cookie, a lump forming in his throat. He hadn't eaten since lunch. "Thank you," he said, his voice thick. As they sat in comfortable silence munching on the cookies, the station door hissed open again. A young woman stumbled in, soaked to the skin, her breath coming in ragged hitches. She wasn't crying. It was worse. She was utterly still, shaking from more than the cold, her eyes hollow and lost. She looked around the empty station, a portrait of despair, before her legs seemed to give out and she sank onto a bench opposite them, burying her face in her hands. Leo and Eleanor exchanged a glance. The girl's anguish was a palpable force in the quiet space. Leo felt his own problems shrink in comparison. He made to stand, but Eleanor's frail hand on his arm stopped him. "Wait," she whispered. Then Eleanor stood up. She moved slowly, with a grace that belied her age, and walked over to the young woman. She didn't sit immediately, just stood nearby, a silent, gentle presence. The girl finally looked up, her mascara smudged by rain and tears. "Rough night?" Eleanor asked, her voice the embodiment of warmth. The girl, Maya, stared at her, then gave a broken laugh. "You could say that. Lost my job, then my apartment. My phone died. I have nowhere to go. I just needed to get out of the rain." The words were a monotone, drained of hope. "My name is Eleanor, and that thoughtful young man over there is Leo. We were just having cookies and waiting." She didn't say for what. Maya shook her head. "I'm sorry. I don't mean to. I'll just go." "You'll do no such thing," Eleanor said with gentle firmness. She reached out and took Maya's cold, wet hand in both of her own. "You are exactly where you need to be." Leo watched, mesmerized. He saw Eleanor lean in and speak softly to Maya. He couldn't hear the words, but he saw Maya's rigid shoulders begin to tremble, then soften. He saw her lean in to Eleanor, the older woman wrapping an arm around her. It was a painting of compassion. And in that moment, the twist wasn't a dramatic event, but a quiet, seismic shift inside Leo's own heart. The realization washed over him like a wave. He was the stranger who had approached, but the miracle wasn't for him alone. Eleanor was waiting for them, for his angry, lonely heart to be opened by a cookie and a listening ear, so he could be present to witness this, and for Maya, in her moment of absolute darkness, to find a hand to hold in the cold. He walked over, his own heart feeling strangely full and light. "My ride's on the way," he said, holding up his phone. "It's a big car. It can take us all. Eleanor, I'll take you home. And Maya," he looked at the young woman, "my sister's been traveling for months. Her apartment is empty. She gave me the key to water the plants. It's small, but it's warm and dry, and you can stay there tonight. We can figure out the rest tomorrow." Maya looked between them, disbelief and a fragile hope dawning in her eyes. "Why would you do that for me?" Leo smiled, a genuine, unburdened smile he hadn't felt in years. He looked at Eleanor, whose eyes were glistening with quiet joy. "Let's just say," Leo said, "we were all waiting for someone tonight." The ride was quiet, but the silence was no longer empty. It was peaceful. Leo dropped Eleanor off at her little house with its well-tended garden. She took his hand as she got out. "Thank you for waiting with me, Leo," she said. "No," he whispered, his own eyes misty. "Thank you for waiting for me." The next morning, Leo didn't rush to work. He called his boss and with a new calmness asked for a proper meeting. Then he met Maya for coffee. They connected her with a friend who was hiring, and Leo's sister, when he called her, happily agreed to let Maya stay longer in exchange for looking after the place. A week later, Leo found himself at Eleanor's door again, not out of obligation, but with a bouquet of flowers and a box of the finest peanut butter cookies he could find. They became an unlikely trio, the weary young man, the woman starting over, and the widow who listened to quiet voices, a small family built not by blood, but by a shared moment of grace on a rainy night. The story didn't end with grand fortunes or solved all problems, but it began with a choice on a cold bench. Leo learned to listen to the quiet nudges of his own heart. Maya found her feeding one day at a time, and Eleanor, she continued to wait where she...
For love is always on its way, often in the form of a stranger who was just waiting for a sign to be kind. Share this story if it reminded you that we are all instruments in a symphony of compassion, and sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is simply show up and wait.